So I'm, I guess, labeled an insurance guy. I'm also a marketing guy. I've been in the industry for 20 plus years. Actually started with Penn Mutual Life Insurance Company, which used to be right down the street here at 5th and Walnut. Moved out to a small town called Horsham, Pennsylvania, which is about 20 miles northwest of here. But spent 12 years in the life insurance space. And then also have spent some time on the technical side, because I'll preface this by saying I'm a business guy. I'm not a technical guy. But I've been working with a lot of companies such as Teradata. I don't know if some of you are familiar with that. Data Warehouse Company. Used to be a division of NCR Corporation. And then also Pitney Bowes. So spent a number of years actually working on the insurance verticals for both of those companies. So I was asked to at least speak a little bit about what's changing in the industry with insurance and what I'm seeing. And I guess as an editor with ITA Pro, and here's a quick little commercial if I may. So Insurance Technology Association, ITA is the abbreviation. This is an association of about 3,000 insurance professionals, primarily property and casualty, although they're building up on the life side as well. But there is a publication, ITA Pro, which I was editor of. This comes out bi-monthly, but the part that I loved about this the most was actually being able to merge the business side with the technology side, because it's an opportunity to talk to a lot of CEOs, CIOs, CMOs, I mean, all the top leaders in the industry who are doing things in the industry as it relates to technology. And there's a lot going on, as you can see just from this space with CCM. But ITA Pro has been going for a number of years. It's an award-winning magazine. It actually won awards before I came on board. But I spent a little bit more than a year with ITA, and it was a great session to be able to talk to people like Marcus Rue, who heads up Guidewire, and some of the other folks that are really thought leaders in the industry and moving things along. They have something called the Bridge Awards, which they give out annually, and it's bridging the gap between technology and business. So these are insurance companies that they actually have to submit a piece that talks about how they bridge the gap, how their teams bridge the gap between business and technology. So each year we give an award to groups that are well-deserving of that space. And then also there's an annual ITA live event. If some of you are insurance, that's definitely a place to go. It's a small, intimate group. Last year, or this year I should say, we had about 100 people that were there. So we like to keep it small and intimate. If it got to 150, that's probably still okay, but the idea here is very intimate, very connected, build relationships, actually able to talk to vendors. Vendors can talk to carriers. A lot of interaction going on, so I can't speak highly enough of that. So enough for that commercial. So I did want to talk first a little bit about digital transformation. I think this is probably the most overused term. Every time I pick up a paper, every time I look at some news, it's always digital transformation. So I will talk about that and get that over very quickly. Then talk about the new communications paradigm, what's happening in the industry, some of the trends and challenges that insurance faces, and there are many, as some of you I'm sure are aware. How digital does matter in insurance. And this is actually, I love being part of ITA. I got a chance to talk to a lot of analysts, talk to a lot of media, but also get a lot of research reports. And there's one that just came out from Gartner around branding, but also how insurance carriers are kind of flunking the grade. But I thought it might be some interesting information just to part. And then the end, just be the change, because so much of this I see, there are so many great things going on. There's so many vendors out there that have great applications. Companies are trying to address this. But quite frankly, if the culture isn't there, if the people, the leadership aren't involved, if they don't see this, it just comes into I think Skip mentioned it earlier. It's almost like you're running as fast as you can, all of a sudden you're in sand and you're going nowhere fast. So wanted to talk a little bit about that. Digital transformation. I used to think digital transformation's only been with us for maybe 5 years, maybe 10. Does anybody think it's been longer? Anybody think 50 years? America just celebrated a big anniversary, something that happened 50 years ago. Anybody remember?
Internet.
Somebody said? To the moon. First moon landing, 1969. So I'm an avid history buff. I'm also an avid reader. If you get a chance to pick this book, I recommend it strongly. But this is One Giant Leap, talks about the impossible mission that flew us to the moon. So his argument, his challenge, is that digital transformation actually started back then. That when you had the engineering, the science, everything that had to go into the moon landing, all crunched into 8 years, and being able to take a computer that used to be the size of a room like this and put it into a 1 foot by 1 foot to fit into a lunar module that they could actually transport to the moon and get onto the surface because of payload restrictions. That's when he said digital transformation really started to change. Of course, you had integrated circuits, things like that came later on, but his argument, and I don't disagree with a good portion of it, is that digital transformation was happening back then, being able to take big things, make them into small, make them workable. And this book is just amazing. You're talking 400,000 scientists, engineers that spent 8 years to create something that didn't exist in the first year. Rockets didn't exist. I mean, they had rockets, but nothing that could carry the payload to the moon. The suits, the spacesuits that the astronauts wore, that didn't exist. So much of this stuff just was amazing. And a little bit about the engineering. One thing that I didn't know, which I found fascinating, is when they were looking at the lunar module, they kept trying to figure out a way to get the astronauts from the lunar module down to the surface. Anybody want to guess what their first thought was? Well, that's pretty close. Rope. They were going to tie a rope from the lunar module and actually have them drop to the surface. And thinking later on that if an astronaut got injured, how's he going to climb a rope? So they found a way to actually fit a ladder onto there and with the payload restrictions that they had, and that's now history. So, sorry, I digress. Quick trivia. Anybody know how many American flags have been planted on the moon?
22.
I'll give you a hint. There were 7 moon missions. Anybody see the movie Apollo 13? Never landed. So 6 is the magic number. Yeah. So 7 moon missions, minus the one because Apollo 13, because of the accident, didn't make it. They flew around the moon, never got to land. So.
Are they still there?
Yes. Amazingly so. There's also flags from Russia, China, India. I think there's 1 or 2 others as well. Just modules that have been planted there, but not actual. You know, no one else has walked the moon, but us. New communications paradigm. So this is my one slide just to talk about insurance. For those of you who are not familiar with insurance, and I could talk insurance for days probably because there's so much information behind it. But this just gives you a snapshot of what insurance is all about. So insurance net written premiums, and that's how they gauge their success in the marketplace in terms of kind of like revenue. $1.2 trillion in 2017. So that's a huge number, and it's a big, big marketplace. Property and casualty, it's almost mixed half and half. Life and annuity, 52%. Property and casualty sector, 48%. There are almost 6,000 insurance companies just in the United States alone. 2,500, the predominant number is property and casualty, and 852 life and health. And health insurance isn't covered here because that's normally considered a totally different sphere. But just from insurance alone, these are big numbers. 2.7 million people employed in 2018, and then insurance carriers contributed $602.7 billion, 3.1% to the GDP of the United States. So this is a big, big marketplace. It's been around for a long, long time. A lot of people don't like insurance, but it employs a lot of people, brings in a lot of money, and keeps a lot of us from the consequences of risk. That's what insurance carriers are all about. I think a lot of insurance carriers would consider this the 3 dams forging the new paradigm. Damn Amazon, damn Apple, damn Google. Because before all of this, insurance companies were fat and happy. They didn't have to worry about too much stuff. They had their traditional way of doing business. They would send their direct mail programs out. They would send out emails. They would wait for the business to come in. Of course, insurance does work with agents, so agents and brokers, so that's an intermediary in between that. But in many cases, this completely turned their world upside down. It's like running into a wall because all of a sudden, everything that they had created needed to be recreated. And when you're talking about CCM, that's a huge play because now the customer is at the center of the universe. And the insurance carrier is just kind of sitting there off to the sidelines figuring out how do I bring that business in and how do I work from that. So, I use the word expected to provide great service. In some cases, they've been forced to provide great service. But this whole digital transformation, everything that's happened, and it's not just these three companies, but I think a lot of carriers probably kicked themselves, at least early on, that they had to make these huge changes and then trying to figure out how to do it. Insurance still struggles with innovation today. You're talking highly regulated. It's as highly regulated as banks, maybe more so. Financial services alone has got lots and lots of regulations. Document intensive, as you folks all know. I mean, there's claims, there's policies, there's information that's constantly being put back and forth from a marketing perspective, all of that. So it's a lot of entanglement, if you will, in terms of how these things all get communicated and how they kind of work together or don't work together. They've been notorious for siloed business lines, and I think that's probably the same with a lot of different industries that are out there, but insurance especially so, because trying to look at a customer from the customer's perspective across all these different lines is still very difficult to do. They've made inroads to do that, but it still needs some work. You've got legacy systems. I mean, me being on the life side of the business, I mean, in some cases, a legacy system might be 50, 60, 70 years because you're still going to have policies on the books. If a person bought this life policy when they were in their 20s and they're living to 90, that system still stays in place, or at least they try to convert it to something else. But legacy systems are rampant, and it's just something that every day you hear that as a major issue. And then long-established culture and processes, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, just in terms of carriers that are just very happy with the way they've been doing. Like, why should we change? This is the way we've always done business. This is something that, we're successful. But at the end of the day, they're not going to continue to be successful if they keep doing the things the way they've been doing them. So I still think culture and processes play a huge part in that. I'm not going to say I stole this. I borrowed this from, and I borrowed a lot of research that's in this particular presentation. But in this case, this was a Salesforce customer experience survey that they did. This was just last year. 6,700 consumers and business buyers. And I mean, just looking at some of the bullets, 76% of customers say it's easier than ever to take their business elsewhere because they're looking for that perfect experience. 67% say their standards for a good experience are higher than ever. And that bar, I think, keeps going up every single day. I mean, every time I'm going in, whether it's in Amazon, when I'm going into Target, whether I'm going to, my expectations are getting higher. You don't normally think that of insurance, but if you've got a claim, you just had a car accident, you want immediate response. You don't want to be waiting. You don't want to be waiting for service. You don't want to be waiting for anything. 70% of customers say that connected processes, the seamless handoffs, or the ability to engage with a company based on earlier interactions are very important to winning their business. And then 72% of customers share good experiences. You see that all the time, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Facebook. There's constantly information going out saying, well, this was a great experience, this was a bad one. And the bad ones seem to resonate with all kinds of people. This is just kind of a quick graph in terms of how we've evolved over the years. Happily or sadly, I kind of fit into the baby boomers space there. But just in terms of how we've converted from the traditionalists, this is before 1945, a lot of statements, paper. I mean, we still have paper, we still have statements to a degree, but that was basically the way business was done. Baby boomers with the phone, interactive voice response. Generation X with emails and websites. Millennials, which is Generation Y. Social media, and Generation Z with text and chat. And that doesn't mean that these are all siloed. In fact, I find myself actually doing more of texting than I do of calls anymore, which surprises even me. Maybe the iPhone should be listed as something iText or something else. I don't know. But we always tend to segment these groups, and it's interesting just to see we're talking to all these people and how best to do it. And from a CCM perspective, how do you get that information? How do you integrate? How do you get that message across to these particular groups the way they want it? This has been a change in the whole marketplace. Some trends and challenges. First one is cloud. I don't think there was one article that I wrote in the last year that did not say something about cloud. Cloud seems to be like the number one. And if you were talking insurance 5 years ago, this was not the case. Cloud might have been with cloud might have been marketing or sales, because those weren't core competencies and they actually weren't core systems. They didn't want to put underwriting, they didn't want to put policy, they didn't want to put claims up in the cloud. They were afraid, a lot of issues with that. But cloud, I see it every single day, and it's just amazing how it's become such a main part. You've probably seen these, just the differences in terms of having control, the staff and resource commitment, all on-prem. The big thing here is security used to be the number one issue, I think, for most industries, especially insurance, because they figure they're dealing with lots of data, and very private data in many cases, because policyholder information is very sacrosanct, if you will. But this has changed. The fact that you can scale up or down very quickly is a huge plus to a lot of the insurance carriers today. I love the worry-free. I did copy this from somewhere else. I don't think it's ever worry-free, but the piece with maintenance is always something. Yes, sir?
What, in your opinion, changed to have insurance companies feel comfortable putting their information on the cloud?
So you see a very risk-adverse culture. A few folks took the risk and started moving in that direction. Now they're looking everywhere else. They're looking at all the other industries. They're taking stock of all this. They're talking to the analysts. They're talking to all these folks. But as time went on, and I always compare insurance, if I looked at like insurance and banking as the tortoise and the hare, insurance is always the tortoise. It's always a slow-moving, methodical, it's getting to its place eventually. It does take its time, but you're talking about such a risk-adverse culture that I think it just took them a long, long time to finally do that. But once you start seeing one do it, then somebody else catches on, and I think it's just right on down the line.
So it wasn't that the technology was dynamically more secure. Somebody took the risk, and then their competitor looked at it and said, well, they went to the cloud, it must be okay.
I'd say that's a major part. Technology is always changing, right? So that's always going to keep increasing as time goes on. But my personal opinion, and from what I've seen and heard from the industry, it's a few companies that actually started to take that risk and had the wherewithal to be able to plot ahead. What do you think?
Asking me?
Yeah. I mean, you've seen it.
We were just talking about this at lunch. So I think there are always going to be the leaders on that bell curve,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Who are risk takers. And in insurance, of course, that means something different than we would normally think about because they're not super risky, but
Yeah.
still there are going to be those leaders. I also think that we as people have been influenced by technology so much in our personal lives. The phones, all of the stuff around us, my smart washing machine and my smart, technology is influenced how I view technology.
Sure.
And I think that has had an impact on how people who do business work, right?
Right.
And so while there were those leading consumers in the insurance space, I also think the influence of technology just on people pushed the bigger chunk.
Right.
So, from a Ghost Draft perspective, we've been in the cloud for 8 years. So 8 years ago, it was a really hard conversation to have. People were very scared about it. It took months and months to convince people. Now, it's 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And we say we run on Azure. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, I've got 4 questions I have to ask him if he runs on Azure. Do you secure stuff this way? Do you use this thing? Okay, we're good.
Sorry, didn't mean to put you on the
Yeah,
spot.
no,
I
it's
was,
fine. It's funny because we were just talking about that at lunch.
but I know you've been, around the industry and you've been involved in this stuff too. So, I totally agree with that. That's always a push in as well. I also think the anywhere, anytime access and even the subscription, the fact that you don't have to put a huge amount of money in place. Insurance carriers were always notorious for that, building these big systems. In fact, if you look at insurance back in the 70s and 80s, they were actually leaders in technology. They may not be well known, but they had the IBM systems. They had a lot of these systems, in place that were just phenomenal. I mean, they were actually leaders in the technology piece. And then there was a period of time where they didn't. They weren't investing. They kind of figured this is enough to keep them going. And then digital transformation comes about, and disruption starts, and it just, spurns them on. But I honestly believe with a lot of these things, you've got core systems that have been in place for years and years and years. And some of them have been upgraded, a lot of them have not. But in a lot of cases, they're not able to work with those systems anymore, and that's why you're seeing a lot of change as well.